Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Over the course of almost 2 years, StarRail has released plenty of characters to the point that it's kind of concerning we're going to catch up with Genshin's character count. Like explained previously, even old and bad characters had mechanics that are unique only to them. But some characters are so mechanically unique that you kinda wonder if they will someday become useful for a specific trait alone being suddenly valuable. Well, so far this has been mostly true, and certain traits brought certain characters back to greater relevance, like Su Shang, Gallagher, and Shui in Super Break due to the revival of the once awkward break stat, or Guinaifen and Silverwolf's debuff application used to be somewhat negligible until free-to-play ratio and Acheron teams. However, some mechanics have not seen such resurgences and can be argued have been forgotten about by the time of this video's creation. We now take a look at forgotten character mechanics that became missed opportunities. In no particular order, by the way, this isn't a ranking. Asta, Tingyun, Sparkle, and Yukong all had damage increase traces for same element damage dealers. The concept of mono element teams have had a stop and start over the patches. In 1.0, Asta was as good as you could get as a mono element enabler, and since making teams around weaknesses was important, it was actually a somewhat feasible thing you could build around. However, it became evidently clear that Asta is more than just her element. Her speed boost is so good compared to her mono element trace, and the fire DPS options were not as good that she ended up being not used for her mono element niche. Tingyun was kind of a similar way, but better since Jingyuan was the same element and was actually great at that point. Mono element had an indirect advantage when Silverwolf released, but that was more of Silverwolf's RNG necessitating it, rather than mono element being intrinsically strong. The hype around mono quantum has persisted for so long, but the reality of mono quantum as a team archetype being strong was entirely dependent on Silverwolf's implant RNG and the genius set than the synergy between quantum characters with each other. Later on, Sparkle released, and like Asta, her attack trace was not worth building around since the damage dealers of mono quantum gained so little from it, compared to just running a different DPS with better scaling. Coupled with the light cones and the Pentacony set, it seems like such an obvious layup that the benefits of mono element would have been top tier at some point. The best we ever got of mono element, ironically, wasn't with mono quantum, who had the traces for it, but now with mono fire on super break teams. Though you can argue that's pretty much just a Silverwolf situation, and the result of Super Break's strongest units being fire than any mechanic saying, hey, bring me more fire units or anything, or really capitalizes on the virtue of just the element alone like Mono Freeze instead of a generic stat boost. Either way, I don't think Mono Element will stay in the dark forever. Someday they may pull out aggressively strong Mono Element supports to bring back bad DPSs from the meta. But for now, Mono Element mechanics is one of the missed opportunities for more teams. They never went aggressive on the overall benefits of it. This is somewhat of a Mono Element mechanic, but it's contained to one character and different enough that I put it here. Serval can extend shocks with 2 turns using her ultimate. This is a pretty strong mechanic that would be served in some way to be meta for the future if there was an embarrassingly short shock DOT that hits hard. Unfortunately, shock hitting hard, even break shock, by itself is already pretty hard to do. If you made this a bleed extension on a physical character, instantly Serval would be really good as a sub DPS for Butil or Luca teams. If there was a future unit that immediately consumes DOT turns, then you may see her going to DOT teams as a erudition character, weirdly enough. The weird part is that DOT also kinda has a mono element quality to it, like when DOT character Sampo only triggering shear, Luca only bleed, and Guinaifen only triggering burn. There's some definite groundwork for these units to be meta someday with a better enabler to aggressively want them, but it has not happened yet to get them noticed. You can't consider DOT in the same light as Serval's extension ability. It could have a lot of potential, but shackled with bad numbers and not enough depth in its supports to finally pull the trigger. Like the previous one, there's still some future for mono DOT teams if they really decide to, but they've never dug the well hard enough to find and sort of forgot about it over time. This last one is a little different from the others. It's not a mechanic that could be good for the character that has it, but simply a mechanic that hasn't been explored and copied by new characters, for some strange reason. We've seen some pretty wild ultimate deviations recently in StarRail. At first it was all just hits the enemy, heal, or buff something when you press this button, but with the recent releases of Acheron you can do 3 ultimate attacks at a time. Fei Xiao can switch between 2 attacks, and Rappa can switch targets and changes her target count on each hit. The thing about these recent ultimate gameplay is that they really aren't dynamic. Acheron slashes don't matter which one you target outside some really cringe scenarios. Fei Xiao's hits are illusions of free choice and you don't get that much optimizing it. And Rappa is probably the best of the bunch in dynamic ultimate gameplay because focusing toughness damage does matter to her, but it still is a bunch of fixed attacks. But what if I told you there was another character who actually had a more dynamic ultimate than all three of these characters? Not just that, it's one of the oldest units in the game. Yes, I'm talking about the 5-star, the god themselves, Physical main character. Physical main character's ultimate can switch to either blast or single target. Unlike Acheron, targeting actually matters. Unlike Rappa, you had 2 attacks you could select. And unlike Fei Xiao, the 2 buttons had significantly different damage distributions that mattered. I wonder why they haven't gone back to this design for more recent units. Being flexible for both AoE and single target content with a dynamic ultimate seems like something they would want to eventually do, instead of goofy bounce being inconsistent ultimates. But I guess not. Who knows, maybe this will be on the chopping block soon, and hopefully we get some good gameplay of a new updated character with actually good numbers to copy this. But for now, dynamic ultimates are still not fully realized, and I really wish that it will someday. But yeah, this is my list, I guess, of elements of character kits being missed opportunities. Don't take this as like a criticism of these units or the game in general. As a game dev, it's inevitable that you're going to forget a bunch of things and you may go back to it later, and 1 year passes and you still haven't gotten to it. It happens, right? But you really have to admit they kind of forgot about these mechanics. So yeah, I'll see you later. Like, share, subscribe, do the August stuff. The regular stuff I don't need to tell you and remind you anymore. Join my membership. I'll see you later. Bye bye.